Hi, I'm Paul Morris, host of Radical Wealth Plan. I'm a New York Times best-selling author, prolific investor, and award-winning entrepreneur dedicated to helping you find and fulfill your personal vision of wealth by investing in real estate. So whether you're new to the game, an investment professional, or a real estate titan, join us to be entertained, educated, and inspired. This is Radical Wealth Plan, a new podcast presented by Entrepreneur Media. Adam O'Neill, welcome to Radical Wealth Plan.
Thanks, Paul. It's great to be here.
Great. And we met not that long ago, and I feel like, I don't want to be presumptuous, but
you can be.
I feel like we've really hit it off in some interesting ways, connected in some interesting ways.
I find it to be amazing. I think we've spent probably 5 hours together, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And they've been absolutely magical. And
yeah.
Like conversations about everything and nothing, and including business and not business, and it's family and life and spirituality and everything. And it's been pretty epic.
I love it. So, for my editor and producer and director, we'll have to talk about business, I think.
Well, I think we are today, actually.
Yeah.
So I think it's necessary and needed, and I think but I also think it was a beautiful segue to
for sure
to talking about business, getting to know someone first and understanding them and getting a feel from them and energy, and I think is critically important if you're ever going to do any type of business with anyone.
That does roll straight into good business advice, because in your business you find a contractor, or you find a maybe a lead contractor or a lead business partner, and they may bring a lot of things to the table that you need them to bring, but it's still important to have that personal chemistry. And the opposite, as I know you've had some, as we all have had some ups and downs, but you've got ups and downs in markets, but you could also have ups and downs in partnerships.
100%. Having had 30 years of partnerships, whether it's true business partners that are in a partnership, or it's on a project where you're partnering with somebody. But also I actually look at partnerships really as most business relationships, especially ones where you're going to work with someone more than one time. I mean, they're a form of partnerships.
For sure.
And they're also legal, right? Generally contractually legal. So
right.
And I do believe it's treating every form of partnership like a relationship that matters, and integrity is critically important in getting to know someone. I do think it's a balance of, how much effort and time and do you need to really get to know someone if it's going to be a shorter relationship. But if it's ever going to be something that blossoms and turns into a long-term relationship where you grow together, it's critically important.
And you know what? I think I'll footnote that, because I really want to get back into that, but right out of the gate. So give me a bit of history. First of all, tell us what you do.
I am a real estate developer and a contractor. We have a business, specific urban builders, and we do everything from manage and oversee design development all the way through permitting, including entitlements, and we also build as a third party for others. And the other division in the business is as a developer. The focus is on small to mid-size multifamily development. And when I say small, generally starting at 4 or 5, anywhere up to about less than 100 units. So that is that's what our company does.
So 4 or 5 units, all the way up to 100. And to reiterate that, you've got a design build firm that you, so you can be hired to do design build for other people, but then you also have, and have done and still do your own developments, where you would have your own projects, your own investors, and
Yeah, so primarily for the last 30 years, I have been a developer. I've had two companies in which we have been the developer, but also have our own entitlements permitting in-house, as well as general contracting corporation. In my last company, we had our own manufacturing of wood frame panels and kit parts, prefabrication, our own architectural studio, and then entitlements, permitting, acquisition, development, and construction as well, all under one roof. It's only recently, this is actually my first time sitting on the other side of the table, being a builder for others. So it's a new thing for me to have started that.
And that, very, very interesting. And I know that we've gone through some of that. And I want to build a little bit of a bridge, because my investment background for 30 years has been in buying multifamily and adding value, generally holding. That's also a very common entry-level strategy. That's not to say it's beginner stuff, because it's an entry-level strategy that goes all the way up to, for example, my friend Rick Selby, who's, or another guy that we interviewed that, he sold his multifamily portfolio for $2.4 billion. So it doesn't have to be small potatoes. But like I said, I want to build a bridge. And the bridge that I want to build is this. I do a lot of reels. I do a lot of teaching, investing. And part of the beauty of the podcast is bringing on people that do some other things. And to really highlight one thing is entitlements. So when I do a project, when I look for a value add project, I'm looking in a neighborhood that's a shifting neighborhood, let's say, one that's, it's already starting to improve. So it's not all the way there yet. There's still room to move. And then even inside of that, I buy sort of a building that hopefully looks more ramshackle than it really is. That's that's the sweet spot. And then I go in and it's like cosmetic, it could be mechanical, okay, well, we need to change the electric. We need to change the plumbing. We need to change the roof. That's, that sounds major, but it's really not that major. And when somebody's showing me a piece of land and they go, this could be, this could be a skyscraper. This could be a mid-size office building. It's used right now as a car wash, but just look at the area. It would be perfect for, a 10-story medical building. And I go, thank you very much. I'm off to the next project.
Yeah, I think that there's hearing what you're saying, and I believe that you and most people involved in real estate investments, whether it's office, storage, multifamily, across all the spectrums of the different investment vehicles, they're fearful of the entitlements, and especially fearful in the state of California.
For sure.
And then within specific cities within California, like Los Angeles, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and the like. I think what's shifting, I shouldn't say I think, I know it's shifting, is California, and politics within California has absolutely shifted because essentially housing has just become unaffordable. And people are leaving the state, or people can't afford to live here. They have to, if they are able to live here, they live farther and farther away from their jobs and their family. And so it's become such a huge problem in the state that the energy is absolutely changing, and how it's changing is at the state level and at some of the local level as well, but especially at the state level, where they're passing ordinances literally monthly. Every single year there's multiple ordinances passed in the recent 5 to 6 years that have been promoting more density and more housing, especially in the urban infill areas throughout California. So some of those ordinances, and we can talk about them either specifically or just at high level, are SB 1123, which allows for 10 homes, even on an R1 site or other multifamily sites, by right, ministerial. Ministerial means You don't have to go through any planning. You don't have to go through any political type of process. You don't have to go through any neighborhood meetings. It's truly by right. And there's no CEQA, which is the environmental law, which I do want to bring up that ordinance, which is huge. Other ordinances are SB 9, where even on R1 sites, you can build a duplex by right. And you can also build a fourplex, but that's very difficult. But you can build a duplex by right. And then is the multifamily ADU ordinance, which is separate from just the traditional ADU ordinance that only allowed one additional ADU. And that multifamily ADU ordinance can be used on all these other ordinance or work or in conjunction with. So you can take a R1 lot and
Split
use
it.
SB 9. You don't
Correct.
have to split it. It's by right. It's not a subdivision. It's not a
Right.
split. It's by right. And then you can build up to, depending on the size and what you can fit, you can build up to 3 ADUs. So on an R1 single family home site, so when I say R1, it's what most people think of as where they live. Residential single family home.
one, yeah.
One home. And you can literally get up to 5 units on that site. It's astounding how much benefit that is. And then to talk about CEQA, AB 130 just passed.
Okay, so
And that's massive.
all right. Well, I'm going to stop you there because
Well,
again,
I do want to come back to the point I was to answer your question, though.
Yeah.
So at some point, because you asked a question about capital and investing, and people are afraid. So I do want to answer that at some point during this conversation.
and I promise you, I keep very good mental notes. I hope to. Right? Somebody can give me a comment that call BS, but I keep very good mental notes. My intention is to where the listener is, and I'm gonna fill in all of these blanks, because going back to what I said before is investing in real estate for 30 years. When anything needed a zoning change or whatever in order to make my thing work, to make my concept work, I was always like, well, no, thank you. I will say that there's another term that I use, which is called brain damage. And that is, brain damage is whatever hard work or not necessarily hard work, but whatever work that the public doesn't see as easy standing between them and the project, the end result. So for example, I'll give you a contrast, because I told you what I like to invest in. So now you go, instead of that neighborhood that's just, getting better and better, I'm going to go to a better neighborhood. It could be right in West Hollywood. It could be Beverly Hills. And let's use sort of West Hollywood, because it's a really good neighborhood, and we're going to buy a really good property in a really good neighborhood. And you and I, with the amount of experience that we have, we both know that really good property in a really good neighborhood is going to be priced to the max.
Absolutely.
And so anything, so what I call brain damage, for example, the first big deal I had, there were 2 major flaws in the property. It happened to be a property that was going to go by auction, so people didn't have a lot of time to do the due diligence. And that's just that's massive brain damage. It scares away even the professional investors. I went around that by just doing the due diligence in advance. I had to lay out the money, because generally you get it under contract and then you spend the money. I'm like, I'm going to take a shot at this. I laid out the money. It wasn't that much money to get an engineer in, to get a level 1 environmental study, small piece of property, didn't cost that much money. But that was the brain damage, and that's what enabled that first big deal that I did to be a total home run. Now, entitlements, I will tell you, is massive brain damage. So that if you really understand entitlements, so we've got listeners all over the country, and when you go to look at a place, they're like, oh, well, this parking lot could be an office building, but it's not exactly zoned for it. You just go to the city and that's huge brain damage. If you happen to know exactly how to do that, then you have that skill to get around that thing that's keeping the entire rest of the market away from doing that. Now they'll look at that lot and they'll go, let's value it as a parking lot, or let's value it as a car wash, and that'll be sort of the max price. But if you could look at it as something else and know you could get there, then you're talking about.
So specifically, what you're alluding to, and you coming back to similar to what you were questioning before, is the complex nature of entitlements or permitting. So what has happened? It really is nothing short of astounding that it has happened. But there's been an absolute shift, and the shift has been not just the ordinances I mentioned, but the state of California have created an arm within at the state level to in fact use leverage to force these cities and counties and other municipalities to actually make them enact these ordinances and not stand in the way of them. The biggest leverage they're using is RENA, or the housing element that the cities have to update continuously to keep up with the housing needs in the state and their local municipalities. In the past years, they never did, and they just got away with it. Now, the governor and the state are coming down on them, and they're not providing state dollars to these municipalities if they don't update their RENA, update their housing element. And they're in fact suing them in the court, the state AG, if they don't follow them. So this is, again, a sea change and shift. So not only are they passing ordinances, but now they're forcing the cities to actually follow through with these ordinances. Before, they would just ignore them. They would put so many barriers in place that it wasn't effective, these ordinances. So this is completely different than before. And I brought up CEQA. So CEQA is, I don't want to go into much detail because it's too long for the listeners, but essentially CEQA is an environmental ordinance that was never meant to be used for small or mid-sized projects for housing, or even really housing in general, unless it's some really huge project. But it's been used by local NIMBYs and local governments and others.
And NIMBY is not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah,
and I'd like to state that YIMBY is yes in my backyard.
Oh,
quite a movement, by the way. So any listener out there, and they're throughout the country. It's not just in California. It's called YIMBY. Just go to yimby.org.
Wow,
they are amazing what the work they're doing across the country to increase housing. So please, all listeners, go to that, participate in it, whether you're in real estate or you're just a person that needs to rent or buy a home. It is a really wonderful organization. So separate from that is CEQA. They just passed an ordinance, I think it was last week, AB 130. AB 130 removes CEQA completely. One does not even have to go through CEQA permitting or the CEQA clearance at all for projects that are market rate and under 85 feet tall. You don't even have to go through it anymore. Unfortunately, they kept in for affordable housing, but to remove CEQA really removes the biggest tool that NIMBYs were using to slow down, stop, or really just completely obliterate projects financially. It's been used against me many, many times, every developer I know. So the fact that they removed that took a lot of guts, courage, and willpower and tenacity, and it absolutely passed. And so this alone is something even bigger than all the other ordinances.
Getting rid of CEQA, is CEQA a national or a state?
State.
Okay.
This Ronald Reagan, you can thank Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you can thank Ronald Reagan for CEQA. But in fairness to Ronald Reagan, he never intended it when he passed that ordinance. He never intended it to be used against these housing projects. That was not his intent.
So, and I would have to jump off there a little bit, again, because it's a national podcast. One of the things is
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
You say it's a national podcast, but California is absolutely the leader in the housing market, and more importantly, in progressive housing policies across the country. So they have been the leader. They're the first ones to pass ordinances where you can develop on R1 lots, single family home lots. They are a leader in the country. So I understand it's a national podcast, but so goes California, often goes how other states and cities and municipalities follow.
Right. And the ADU laws, which my understanding of them is they're state by state. They did not start in, they actually didn't start in California. I think they started in Oregon, but then, they passed this law and they probably worked very hard on it. And then other states see them doing it and they're like, oh, well, let's take a cut and paste of that. Let's bring it over here. Of course, they're going to want to work on it. And then they have their own ADU law. Right. And again, a lot of people tuning in already know what ADUs are. A lot of people who have tuned in certainly know what ADUs are. It's again an acronym for accessory dwelling unit. Maybe
people know them as granny flats is a common term.
Additional dwelling unit. So it's one of those. And what used to happen not that long ago is, in our area, houses start to look the same in areas, so you've got the 2,200 square foot house and then you've got the garage. And what people would do is they would outfit the garage so that it was, they could make it into another unit, but then they would hide all the tie-ins and everything, even plaster them over, and then they would get the certificate of occupancy. And then as soon as the inspector left, then, they'd break the hole and they'd put the washer and the dryer and it was an illegal unit. Absolutely. Nowadays, they're pushing for this so much that to go and add extra square footage for if you wanted to convert your garage into a den or a living, a fun space, you might have a hard time getting that passed. Right. But now you need the sink and the right. So absolutely. So now it has to be an extra unit, and if it is an extra unit, you actually get more.
Well, you can actually get income from the extra unit. You can rent it legally.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's
totally different.
It's completely different. And it's absolutely spreading throughout the country. And to your point about California, even if some other cities sometimes pass it first, when California does it, especially on a statewide level, it shows that the ordinance has merit. And oftentimes then other states and cities will then adopt it even more quickly.
So, and I want to get back to some of the, we can and will stay, somewhat state specific just because
now that you mentioned national. So let's take development and what we're doing here in California and talk about it on a national level, how it is beneficial and different from from just a value add, maybe multifamily play.
Well, and I'll say this to you. I'm involved in a development in California, and they basically had it totally wired. And this is an old story for you. This is why I generally don't get involved with and did not come in at the front end of, hey, let's buy this piece of property and do these great things with it. Someone else did that, so therefore someone else has the majority of the upside. But the degree with even the city saying, yes, we really want it, and all these things lined up, and then finally the water district comes in and says no, even though there was enough water. I mean, it's been delayed years now, and so. That's the thing really that has always led me, if I when I shoot reels for my, every man, every woman investor getting in there, I'm like, you find that ramshackle duplex in the area that's move in one unit, fix it up. Right. But there's so much value, because the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm showing them low level brain damage. Right. And here's the way through it. Entitlements are really high level brain damage. And if you can get through the high level brain damage, the upside is huge.
Well, that's it. I think what you're alluding to is that barrier to entry.
And
so when you have a high barrier to entry, if you have specific knowledge locally or statewide, and you have relationships in that municipality, you understand the process. You bring huge value to this development. And when you say, you mentioned the increase in value is manyfold for what you're paying for the land. And then when you go get the permits and build on it, it's incredible.
Yeah, once it's permitted, and people do just that, by the way.
Oh, I did that this is what I did for a big part of my career. I sold to larger companies, Shea Homes, KB Homes, DR Horton, entitled projects, brought them to full entitlements, not even building permits, just entitled, and sold them for multiples on my investment. And sometimes I did that by getting in long escrows, entitling during the long escrow, and never even only closing on it when the purchase came in. And so there's a way for people to absolutely maximize their knowledge and expertise to make quite a good living doing that.
And I'll give you a real numbers example of that, because I did that. I did that on an early project. It wasn't that I was getting new entitlements. I was finding a new use for property that was available under the entitlements, but I found a new, higher and better use for a piece of property. It was essentially, it was property that a railroad company had taken by eminent domain, and then they build the railroad and they realize they don't need all that land, and so that's also not that uncommon. And this huge beer distributor went in and bought this giant parcel of land. They built their entire plant and everything on one half of it, and the other half sat vacant. They were very happy with the purchase, I can assure you. But the other two parcels that were next door, there's just nothing to do with them. And they had a price ticket on it, and let's just use a round number. It was a long time ago. Let's just use a round number, say $1 million. And the most they had ever been offered, it just sat there. And they loved the beer distributor. There was this really bustling business. They were happy. Maybe they paid $1 million for the entire thing. They build their whole thing. They go, okay, we'll sell the other half for $1 million whenever somebody feels like paying it. They left it. The highest price that they had gotten in 2 or 3 years was $700,000. And I found a better use for it. The better use for it was that, like an urban infill, the nearby hospital medical center was doing this $1 billion expansion, and they needed offsite parking during the time that they were building. It wasn't even close enough. Like, you wouldn't look at it and go, oh, well, this is a natural parking lot for this thing 2 miles away. So, but I knew that because I was in that business. So therefore I had some, basically, it sounds like insider information, but of course it's not illegal. Local knowledge. Thank you. Very good. Local knowledge. Because it's not illegal insider information.
It's illegal.
And so it was University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, because that's where I was living, and they're like, oh yeah, our parking is a nightmare, and we don't know, and then it's a nightmare already, and they're looking for spaces 5, 6 at a time, and they came to us because we had a little parking garage, and we're like, well, we could give you 5 or 6 spaces. How many do you need? And they're like, 1,500. I'm like, wow. And you're calling around trying to get 5 or 6 at a time. Like, we're doing what we can do. So that's how I sort of found the property. But what I did was, and this is very analogous to what you're saying, is I went to the owner of that property, and instead of saying, I said, look, you've had it for sale for 2.5 years for $700,000, which means if I'm a real buyer, I probably could have gotten it for $600,000. Say, you know what, I have $600,000. Here we go. I couldn't afford to pay $600,000 for a piece of railroad property that nobody has any use for at all. But what I did was, I went to that owner and I said, instead of $700,000, I'm going to give you a purchase offer for $1 million. But I need this massive, and I think it was really like 800 for tying it up for a certain period of time. But then if I got to that period of time, I had by right the ability to increase the price to 900 to get like another 6 months, and then increase to $1 million for another 6 months. I never thought I would need it, and I went all the way to the $1 million price tag. But I didn't purchase the property until the hospital said, yes, we want that.
What was your final sale price?
Well,
Would you sell it?
We
What did you?
Yeah, we did sell it. We were thinking about just using it as a coupon,
Right.
And I mean, it's an interesting story in and of itself because
But the finality
I
was,
I did all the math on a 10-year, okay,
Right.
and I was so close to the finish line, and I get a call from the guy who's the decision maker for UPMC on parking, who knows where they are in the finance department in that world, and he goes, yeah, we. And I had a price for him that was beautiful. It was great for us, and he loved the price. It was all good. And he goes, last minute, actually, I can't do it for 10 years. I can only do it for 5. And I'm like, it blows every projection out of the water. It does all, and I'm like, instead of like losing my mind and everything, I said, well, I'm going to have to talk to my business partner. And then we hung up, and then we screamed and yelled and cried for not that long. And we just redid the math and basically increased the rent that we were asking by like 80%.
Yeah, and the IRRs are probably through the roof too.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, whatever we were charging, $20,000 a month or whatever. You're like, well, actually, we're going to need, $38,000 a month.
Yeah.
Just see what happens. And they're like, oh, okay, sure, no problem.
What you're talking about is really just creative ways to make money in real estate. And anyone with some tenacity and willingness to seek knowledge and make contacts can do this. I started out, I shared my story with you coming out here, and I was a LAPD police officer.
Amazing.
Right. And so, nothing to do with real estate. But my dad had some small apartments we used to rehab and fix up. And I was always one of those kids that bought, the books, How to Buy Real Estate with No Money Down, the ones with the tape decks on one side and the pamphlets on the other. And I just read. But when I came out here.
Did any of those formulas work?
You know what they did? Yeah, I think the Buy Money with No Money Down alluded to the fact of what we're talking about.
It does,
right?
Yeah, it does.
So it goes right, yeah, absolutely connected to that. It just opens your channels up for creative thinking, right?
Correct.
So it's not like you're going to use that exact formula. No book generally gives you an exact recipe to follow, and you're going to get this exact result.
That's what we try to do here.
Well, good luck with that. But what you do is you open up channels in your brain for creativity, to look at things differently, to have new ideas be created in your brain. And then when you follow through with them, you learn new things, right? And so I came out here, and just quick story, I didn't have a lot of money to go buy real estate. I never raised money. My family didn't have a lot of money to help support me in that way. But I found scouts. I looked at the foreclosure list, and I used to print them via fax. And I would look for equity in properties, people with equity still in their property. And then I would hire scouts in the neighborhood to go talk to them. And then eventually I would close on those properties. But oftentimes I would cure their mortgage. We would have an agreement to keep their mortgage in place until and I would then purchase the property and then sell it. But my point is, one can be creative in every way. And even if you're creative when you're beginning, that creativity never stops, even when you're at your final stages of your business life. It's always looking at things in a different manner and how you can look at them differently. And I think that's the key to any business. But in real estate, there are endless options and ability to create value, whether it's through financial structuring, whether it's through partnerships, whether it's through contracts, so if someone really wants to be that tenacious, they can go into a neighborhood and understand the local energy and what's happening there, and then look for these parcels that could add benefit to the neighborhood and basically, obviously, financially as well. It's a key thing that people can do if they want to put the effort into it.
And I want to dig into that a bit, but so here you are, an LA policeman, and I know lots of fun roles in that because we talked about that, but detective and
well, not detective, gang units, crime resources against street hoodlums, that was back there, the Colors movie there. I worked undercover narcotics, I worked surveillance. I worked Metropolitan Division where they get like SWAT out of. I wasn't in SWAT, but they get the real special teams there within LAPD. I was a sergeant in charge of the Venice Beach detail.
Wow.
I worked. I was a training officer. Yeah, I worked in a lot of areas. But what that did for me is really connected me to the city.
Yeah,
it really made me understand how the city flows, the energy. It talk about like real estate identifying value in secondary neighborhoods that I could literally feel after about a couple years here, and then working specialized units, I got to work all over the city. I could feel when a neighborhood was changing. You could just see it in the little things, right? Restaurants, cafes coming, little shops. Changing, and don't get me wrong, I understand fully and I'm very aware of what's called gentrification.
Sure.
No, it's not a great word, has pros and cons. So I am fully aware that as a developer, that one has to be very sensitive to neighborhoods changing, right? But you can feel it. My three kids, I have 18-year-old, 19-year-old, they just turned 19, triplets, but they all played very competitive travel ice hockey. So I traveled around the country to these small cities 26 times a year for 10 years. And so I got to really just see neighborhoods, and you just know it driving through it when a neighborhood is ready to be up and coming. And if you get in early enough, and you always want to be in that secondary neighborhood, not the one that's already hip and arrived, you want to get to the one adjacent to it, or even slightly adjacent to the adjacent potentially if you see that growth. And that's when you want to get in, and that's when you want to be creative in the way that we're talking about.
So,
but yeah, it's an LAPD cop, but I can transition to how that evolved.
You're an LAPD cop. You've got very unusual, view. You're in, really in the city and everything. I mean, I could say the same thing about an Uber driver,
Absolutely,
or Postmates. I'm delivering Postmates all throughout the West Side. You're really
100%.
So there's a lot of LAPD. There's a lot of Postmates drivers. There's a lot of Uber drivers, and they're not. Probably most of them are not looking. Like, how am I going to make this work in real estate? So it really is a matter. It is a matter of focus.
It's absolutely a matter of focus. Well, I would say it's first, before it's a matter of focus, it's a matter of curiosity. I think this is this is kind of. I mean, there's multiple things I believe that how to really make one's life peaceful and happy. Is that it really is. It's the magic, right?
Well, I laugh because, I can't, I laugh and I love it that you say that because, if you gave me a little questionnaire and said, all the different types of real estate, where is there going to be more peace and happiness, maybe not more money, because I would check, I would put entitlements to the higher side of the money side, but like peace and happiness, I would, start putting that lower because people are pulling their hair out with the entitlements.
Sure they are, but you say that, but it stems from
the barrier of entry. That creates the wealth.
It's curiosity. Well, it creates much more than wealth. Wealth is just a secondary piece of peace and happiness. Wealth actually has directly nothing to do necessarily, well, very little to do with peace and happiness, but it's curiosity, and curiosity is what drives one's energy and desire to wake up every day and to learn and to be a student constantly in whatever you do, and so having curiosity is a mindset that will allow everything else to flourish and allow you then the space for tenacity, for focus, for and then you can learn a lot of other things from that. But starting with just curiosity is a beautiful, beautiful place to start. So
that curiosity a curiosity of how to unlock a puzzle?
It's curiosity. Even as something simple as like we look at trees every single day, right? And they become ubiquitous, right? We don't we just don't even recognize they're there, but yet they play this incredible role in our actually ability to survive and be alive in this world, right? So it's seeing things, it's starting to either read or meditate or to seek community, to open yourself up to new experiences that allows that curiosity to start to bubble. It's opening up new channels, essentially, in one's brain for these things to happen, for curiosity to come to surface. And so, but if you're not aware, if you don't know what you don't know, then you're never going to get there. So it's seeking curiosity. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, well, yeah, that sounds great. How do I become curious? Well, you have to seek then to become curious. So buy a book on curiosity or knowledge, or seek something new and exciting that you think you have an interest in. That alone starts your curiosity in your path. And then I think the next step is it's being comfortable, being in the uncomfortable situations. When you start to see curiosity or get to have curiosity, you're going to then put yourself in places where you can go with the community to meet other people that are doing something similar, to take a class on it. And people are uncomfortable putting themselves in those situations. I think they're going to fail or not be. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, even if it's a little bit. You don't have to put yourself in an extreme situation. So I think that anyone in any business talking about development, right? Talking to, you're a successful investor, and business owner, but looking when someone tells you about something new, like dive in a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I think I might butcher this one like I did the ADU, but there's
it's accessory dwelling unit, by the way.
Yeah, accessory
dwelling unit.
Oh, so I did have it right.
I think you might have said accessory is one of the words.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
That was one of three
I'll
tries.
give you that.
Okay.
I'll give you that. One out of three ain't bad.
So there's part of the brain called the RAS, which I think is the reticulating activating system or center or whatever. But when you talk about trees, for example, an arborist driving through the city is going to really see the trees, and then the rest of us don't. And the reason why we don't is because a roofer driving through the city is going to be like, wow, that's an interesting roof. And it's those different things, because there are, 100,000 inputs when you drive from home to work, and your brain has to say, get all that, like, don't look at the trees, right. Don't look at the roofs, because you've got the road ahead and a couple other things you're thinking about. So I think, you, in addition to curiosity, you said tenacity and focus. And so right. I think you really have to, one of the ways to open that is to change your focus, because the reticulating, the RAS is only going to let a certain number of things in. Right. So a
little bit about you, as I know from our conversations, things like the hot yoga or the cold rooms, something completely different in uncomfortable situations has allowed then you to not only learn how to extremely focus and quiet your thoughts, but then it allows you to open up channels that now you're allowed to see other things, because you put yourself in extreme situations where you're so focused and you're allowed to get uncomfortable. It just opens your mind to every other thing that you're not even paying attention to. So they're doing things, something as simple as going to take yoga or running. People take up run. It doesn't have to be a physical thing, right? It can be a mental thing, a reading. It can be anything new that you bring into your life that allows you to focus, to turn the brain into one specific thought and not just have it keep cycling. When you do that, then it opens up your ability to see other things. And you don't even know it's happening.
Yeah, it is true.
And it doesn't have to be deep meditation. I know that's a tough practice for some people. It doesn't have to be spiritualism. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It's not necessary to become more aware or awakened, or spiritualism. A lot of people use these terms. It's just necessary to try new things, right? And I think that is a big part of really back into real estate, investing, being successful, and not necessarily successful financially, because when you're successful at peace and happiness with oneself, financially, that just comes next. It is a part of it,
Yeah, we get a lot of people on the podcast talking about that stuff, and I'm so glad they do. And I do wonder, like, people around the country, they're gonna like we are listening to these California fruitcakes,
But you say this isn't wokeness. This isn't being woke. This isn't being a Republican. This isn't being a Democrat. This isn't politics. It doesn't have to enter into that space. It's just it's about oneself. It's about hope, right? Let's talk about hope. Hope is the biggest driver of in this country and throughout the world for humans having hope. So this isn't wokeness. This is none of those things. I'm right down the center with this. It would not having any political, interest here in this conversation or wokeness. Or
sure.
It's about human happiness and
hope, very simply, is just the belief that things will be better tomorrow, or could be better tomorrow than they are today. That's that is hope. And so back to LAPD with curiosity, which I love. But then, I just have to ask, so let just sort of order of magnitude, what's the largest project you've done, or how many projects, just to give people an idea of the scope of work that you've done?
So I'll just tell you the quick first story, because I think this talks about hope and curiosity and tenacity and focus. And I'll be real quick telling it, but I think it's important for listeners because it alludes to what you're just asking. Is I was a police officer. I started doing these small single family rehabs. Then I went to adding square footage. Then I went to ground up of duplexes. And then I found a new ordinance in LA, talk about being early, being smart, local knowledge. It was called a small lot ordinance. People think of it as PUD, those zero lot line type projects throughout the country.
Sure.
And I knew small lot subdivisions. And through the country, most people think of them as PUDs, planned unit developments, and like zero lot lines. So think about townhomes, right?
Yeah, because I'm very familiar with small lot subdivision, because that is what they call it around here. But you said PUD. Yeah,
planned unit developments. It's really tight, dense, urban infill type of townhome style, or they can be single family homes, but real close together. And it's very common.
Just to unpack that a little bit, and that is when you've got a very crowded city, they look to figure out how are we going to get some more housing units. So where you normally had the setbacks, and a lot of times I find the setbacks getting more and more restrictive. In other words, so now you've got an 8,000 square foot lot. You can, for example, where I was living in Santa Monica, every time they pass an ordinance, they're making it smaller and smaller so that people aren't building the McMansions that fill the entire thing, which is one housing unit, no matter how you slice it. So now city planners are looking at that same 8,000 square foot lot, and they're like, not how are we going to let people build a McMansion there, but how are we going to get, 4 units in there so that it serves 4 people instead of 1? And then that's where these things are born.
And there's
planned unit development. And actually, it's the first time I've heard that.
Think about some old towns in the country. I grew up outside of Boston.
Right.
So, they have the brownstones, right? That is exactly what we're talking about, right? That was done back in the 1700s and 1800s, right? In these dense environments, right?
Interesting.
And so this has been common throughout, United States history in urban infill dense environments, very common. You have the row houses. San Francisco. The list goes on. Every person can know in their city that these exist in any major city throughout America.
Yeah, crazy enough, all these years I've been doing this, I never put 2 and 2 together, because I would make the joke that, maybe in Boston, certainly in New York, these houses on top of each other, they call them brownstones, but in Pittsburgh, where I'm from, we call them row houses. Right? And then when I moved to Washington, D.C., again, in a very dense urban area, and I bought a house which was out of my price range, and I talked about that on a different podcast. But it was 110 years old, and I wish I could remember how many feet wide it was, because I felt like
I bet it was 16 feet wide.
It probably was 16 feet,
because that's the minimum usually.
I feel like I want to go like this.
I bet it was 16 feet wide.
Yeah, it probably was 16 feet wide.
I almost guarantee it, actually.
And it was so nice, and it had a basement, and then it had a first floor and a second. So it was like 4 floors in this thing that was like this, and
it's magnificent,
and it was so great. And then I was so happy with it. And I had the stoop, except for the stoop was like about half the size of the stoops that would be in Pittsburgh. And I'm like, I got this little thing to sit out on, and
I'm sure other people did sit out on those.
Oh, absolutely. And I was like, I'm living large, but actually I'm in a half a row house.
But you were living large.
I was living large, for sure.
I can tell by when you talk about it how passionate. And I can see that you had this amazing time during that.
Yeah, it was great. It was a half a row house.
Half a row house.
But what I put 2 and 2 together is that what that came from was this PUD. Again, first time I've heard.
This is one term, a small lot.
Yes.
Subdivisions, PUDs, is other terms that are used. These are just a couple common terms.
But basically, city planners are getting out there and they're saying, look at, we really need to accommodate more people in this area. So we're going, instead of this big setback, we're going to let these people build just right on top of each other.
So what you had is, I think, in most major cities in America, you have expansion of population, and you have this idea that was born out of some book or movie that was talking about everybody lives in a single family house with a white picket fence, and that was everybody's dream and everyone's hope. And that's changing, right? Absolutely, it's shifting. It has shifted for quite some time. That's just not possible and affordable for most Americans, or a lot of Americans now, especially if you want to live close to jobs in urban environments. So if you choose to live in an urban city, in an urban environment close to your job, that's not as practical anymore. So they got to come up with solutions, and they have, to increase the housing in a manner that is acceptable to the residents and the neighbors. And then, like everything else, and this is too much of a complex conversation for this time, but you have to bring along transportation, infrastructure, electricity, water. So there's too many conversations.
Well, that was all, like, as far as I was concerned, somebody else's problem. To be, and just my attitude about it was, when I got to DC, based on the salary that I had, which wasn't a great salary, I had a government job, but made a decent living at it. And, my friends that had similar jobs, they wanted the house with the white picket fence in the yard. And they were all the way in Maryland or wherever. They had this horrifying commute. And I was so happy. You said passion. I was so happy with the 16-foot wide right there. I could come out, and the best breakfast places were right there.
This was a beautiful time in your life, I can tell.
Yeah,
I can tell. I can feel it.
This is I'm in a different beautiful time in my life now, because I live in a different space, which is I love as much. But I love that urban.
So I'm going to go back to the conversation, which we kind of got a little off track, because I think it's important to go back to that curiosity, but to bring it full circle on that is essentially, as a police officer, I had 11 years on. I was a sergeant in charge of the Venice Beach detail. I had to make a decision to climb through the ranks and my real estate career development had just started to grow and grow. But I had my wife had a meeting, and then met some folks in the local area that were politically and also, more importantly, involved in real estate locally, but at a bigger scale. And essentially, I got a meeting with those folks. I came up, and during that time, I said, "Hey, I have this ordinance that's passing soon." And it's beautiful, this small lot ordinance, and I can identify sites. And essentially, I'd never written a business plan. And someone said, well, hey, we need to see a business plan for that. So I'd never written a business plan. I mean, I've been raising money for real estate small, just on one page pro formas, right?
Sure. Here's where we're buying it for. That's the way I like to do it.
And I knew all the knowledge. I mean, I had all the knowledge. Here's what we're buying it for. Here's how much we're going to put in. Here's how long it's going to take. And here's what it's going to be. So I had to write a business plan if I wanted to raise larger sums of money. At the time, I was thinking $20 million, maybe $30 million, which is, going from only raising maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time.
That's a lot of money.
It's a big jump. And I went to, someone introduced me to the dean overseeing the master's program at LMU, their entrepreneurial program. I went and did a presentation in front of their master's, the class, because they had to write a thesis for their final to graduate. And it was a business plan, essentially. And I had multiple people ask me to write my business plan. I worked with them. I ended up hiring the person that wrote the business plan, this young woman, young 26-year-old. She was working full-time as well as going to school, came on board. And the other person that I met with earlier, and the courtesy meeting they gave me for a large fund, they're a large multi-billion-dollar equity fund. They gave me a meeting, and long and short, they invested $50 million into my idea, and with the caveat that I have to leave the police department, and which I did. And I left the police department. I got married and had triplets, but I left the police department. I raised $50 million, and the rest is it goes on from there, from the development. But that took, like you talked about, curiosity, tenacity, a focus, willing to be in uncomfortable positions, do something I had no idea even how to do. I never, at all. I hadn't even taken a financial class in college to do Excel spreadsheets or run financial formulas or to write business plan. I mean, I never took any of those classes, so one can accomplish a lot of things with some curiosity, tenacity, focus.
Amazing. You answered the question I was exactly going to ask, which is, there's a lot of policemen and there's a lot of people in different fields, but I'm like, were you like really the policeman that actually was like the super math nerd, And I think the answer to that is no.
In my case, which is absolutely no.
Yeah, which is cool. Which is cool. I did. In a totally different scenario, a business that I was in, that unfortunately one of the employees, absconded with some of the money, and they sent LA sent their like one of their forensic guys, and in comes this guy with the big handlebar mustache, and I'm like, this is our finance guy, right? And he was so good. And of course, they're asking personal questions about him. And he's like, oh yeah, I was a motorcycle cop for 20 years, but I've really always been like a math nerd. And then finally, I got a chance to get into the financial crimes, and they love me here and I love it here. But
he's found
his
home.
said, you could see this guy sort of like roll up on a motorcycle.
Yeah, on a motorcycle, the big Harley or something.
This is my finance investigator. So
that's great.
Yeah. So yes, you were not that guy. And interestingly enough, 2 or 3 nights ago, I lived next to a fire station, and 2 or 3 nights ago, I had dinner at the fire station.
That's fire, wonderful.
They serve chili. I mean, the fire station chili is a real thing. It's not just a marketing ploy.
Yeah, they're trying to connect with the community. It's
great.
No,
it's wonderful, and they're wonderful neighbors, and And basically, the shift is a tiny little place. There's 6 guys, and 5 guys are, it's the regular, firemen. And one guy was like, "Hey, I know you've, this real estate thing, and my wife read your book because because we had talked before. I gave him a copy of the book. He's like, my wife read the book, and we're now in we're finished our second house, and we paid the mortgage all the way down, and I've got all these questions." And the other firefighters looked like their eyes were going to glaze over, and I said, I'd be delighted. Let's make time. Your wife, you and your wife and I can chat anytime.
I mean, how great is that?
But that is
giving back.
But I got to tell you, he was not a math nerd any more than any of the other guys. He was not. And in fact, what he said was like, my wife runs all the books and everything, and I'm super handy. So I do a lot, we hire crews, but I really know how things are built, so I can oversee the crew. A lot of really intuitively good stuff. We buy near where we live. Number one, we know the area. Number two, I can keep an eye on the product.
Well, firefighters are not the firefighters in particular. The vast majority of them, because of the way they work their shifts, 24-hour shifts.
That's right. They have a lot of
secondary
free time.
Jobs or businesses.
That's correct.
So they're extremely entrepreneurial firefighters because their job's entrepreneurial, right? Every time they go into a fire or a medical situation, it's going into the unknown every single time. They have to think quick and act fast and come up with solutions immediately in a plan of action, right? So they are just exceptionally good the way their brains work. It's in many different capacities.
I've never ever thought about that. But I got to tell you that you really answered the question that I wanted, which is, LAPD definitely doing some real estate, but the kind of real estate that we talk a lot about on this podcast already. And then, flip the switch and it's a $50 million raise, and you're not a finance guy, but you figure out a way to get the necessary financial inputs.
And this is, I think, a big part of what you're saying. It's collaboration. It's people. So what I think part of being a business owner, entrepreneur, finding a new job, when you get a new job, anything you do, it really is more about being open to identifying what you don't know, or the tools or skills that you don't yet have or will never have. And working with people that have those skills, and figuring a way that you motivate them, they motivate you, and they feel part of whatever they're doing, no matter the position they have at the company, whether they're a partner with you, true partner, 50-50 partner, right? Or a senior level person at the company, or their lower level person at the company. It is, everyone has these skills within them, and if you give them the chance, they'll blossom. But it's reaching out to people. People really do, and most people feel that I'm very uncomfortable with this. They love to be asked for what they do and the knowledge that they have. They want to share. Even the most outwardly grumpy person, if you ask them a question about what they do and what they love and they're passionate about it, they absolutely light up. They want to share. Humans want to share. Humans want to collaborate. And so if you just reach out, and literally you can sometimes even reach out to the highest level person at a company, and if you ask in a certain manner, they'll actually probably give you time, or they'll at least identify someone in their company that will give you time, or someone in what they're doing in the field. And this is for anything. I mean, you could be a writer and you could make wooden like tables, carpenter. It doesn't matter what you do. It is if you don't have the knowledge, you can find it, or you can find someone that can collaborate with you. It's absolutely possible, like absolutely possible. And
I have a script for it, because one of the things I love to do is give people, practical, tools. And the script, there are a lot of scripts. The script that I found works quite well for me is, what would it take to earn the right to have lunch with you? And I haven't asked that question as many times as I should have. I've never had someone say no to that.
I agree.
Because it comes from contribution. And then to follow through with that, before a meeting like that, I would call somebody's office. It's their fancy person. I would call their office and I'd say, hey, what do they love? Do they love coffee? Do they love wine? Right. Hopefully it's not wine, because that can be expensive for rich people.
Yeah, I think for a younger person without means, coffee's possible too. Yeah. Anything that, anything that you can do to connect with them, right? And obviously, if you're really looking at a business sense.
It is that extra step. If you call their office and say, hey, he loves, blue bottle coffee because it's
or he
fancy,
loves these bagels
or whatever. And you just
street,
come in and you go, hey, nice to meet you, and you're prepared and you've got your questions, so you're not going to waste their time. Be like, 100%. Hey, I know you love this type of bagel. Here you go. Let me dive in, because I don't want to waste your time. It would be like the best meeting they've had,
maybe in their life, right? And then
we'll
absolutely, because what it will do the first time you do that, because it's always going to be a first time for somebody, right? The first time you do it, you walk out of there and it's magical. You feel on top of the world, because you just did something that was very uncomfortable for you. And almost, I would say 99.999% of the time, especially you make that extra effort, that person is going to share something they're passionate about and they love. And so they're going to do it in a manner that is easily received, right, from the other person. And and that other person is going to feel so good that they just heard all this advice and knowledge, that they're going to walk out of that more curious, more excited about life and about whatever they're wanting to do. And then they'll just turn that on fire. That same technique will turn into meeting people everywhere in their lives, in everything they do, and using that same technique, relationships, friendships, business relationships, growth, everything. It will compound and just grow and grow and grow. And by the way, you'll be such a cooler person that people want to be around.
You have no idea.
When you are that person, right?
You have
so
no
when
idea.
You become that person, everyone wants to share your energy, right? And because it's
and you
energy.
Feel good about yourself in addition to making that. Yeah,
you feel beautiful about yourself, and you wake up every day. Not every day. Life is sometimes challenging. Right. Suffering's part of life, but you absolutely wake up with this spark in your soul. But the majority of people are looking for, right, is that. And
it's amazing, and I have to give this one anecdote, because I watched this woman speak. It was so long ago, I can't remember. She talked about climbing in the ranks of being a reporter, and she finally like landed a job at the Wall Street Journal in the finance section, sort of higher up, and she's like, okay, I've been waiting to do this forever. So calls Warren Buffett's office.
Yeah.
And says, hi, this is so-and-so from the Wall Street Journal, finance, whatever. I'd like to do, an in-person interview with Mr. Buffett regarding da-da-da-da-da. And they, okay, we'll get back to you. They get back to her and they're like, he can see you at, 10:20 a.m. October, it's like 5 months away, and you'll need to absolutely be on time because the meeting will start at 10:20 and it will be over at 10:40. And she's like, wow. She expected, the red carpet to be rolled out. She would be talking to him in a week or two. And she's like, okay. But before that meeting, she called his office and said, hey, I'm confirming I'm coming. I'll be there, in 2 weeks or a week or whatever. What are Mr. Buffett's favorite things? Because, I'd like to bring him something. And she's like, they're like
McDonald's or Coca-Cola or something.
That's
right?
exactly right.
Yeah,
You've guessed it. But she's like, well, he had, you don't have to, right. She just kept pushing, and he said, like, okay, well, he actually loves a cherry Coke. And so she made sure she's got like the cooler, right? She's got the cooler and everything. She's got like the cherry Coke and whatever. And she's like, oh, hi, Mr. Buffett. I've heard you like cherry Coke. May I offer you, here you go. And he's just like, and then she goes on to say that, that the meeting goes, for an hour and 20 minutes instead of an hour, instead of 20 minutes. And when you approach those things, and it's interesting too, because, I found someone who was willing to talk to me very early on in real estate. And it was somebody that was very high up in development in the city, who was also a guy that you had talked to, and that was Soboroff.
Steve Soboroff has played a absolutely major role, early role, especially in my life, for this exact thing that we're talking about. Because what he did is, by giving me that time, and I then saw this huge value in that. But what I also did is I another piece of this, by the way, and I think it's important that we have to say, is that when people give you that time, they will throw out during that conversation multiple things for doors that can be opened, whether it's knowledge or other people. It's up to you as the person that goes to that meeting.
Yes.
You can't go to that meeting and just listen and feel like you're going to get some good energy and walk out of there and have like amazing results without absolute discipline, tenacity, focus, and follow-up. Everything they say, you have to write it down, the piece of little notes, and then every little thing that it's of importance. And sometimes there's nuggets that you don't think that's important, but then you're like, maybe you got to follow up with them. If you don't do that, these meetings will never be successful.
That's
no
correct.
matter how many of them you have.
You get them, they won't be successful.
You think you're going to find some magical thing. They're going to give you one piece of like advice that's going to blow things up, but it doesn't usually happen that way. They're going to give you multiple windows, doors, things that can be open that you have to then follow up on. And then generally, if you follow up with them, then they're going to open new doors, especially if they come from, someone of, that you're seeking knowledge from. But then you're able to then go back to that person later to say, hey, Mrs. Jones,
this.
You know what?
I did
followed
that.
up, and I just want to let you know what's happening in my life, how I followed up from it. And generally that leads to a relationship that will open up so many doors, like it did with my relationship with Steve. And then it also taught me to carry it forward, right? Pass it on, right? To do then the same thing. And so then I am so open. Anyone can call me now. I'll tell them about all these ordinances. I'll let them know what the prices are. I share, right? Because I know how hard it is to do. And if they're willing to do that hard work, that's someone I want to see succeed and do well. So I share. I'm an open person in that way. And Steve really was one of the first people that really, like, my family and other members, people throughout my life. But on a business side, he was the very first person that really taught me that lesson in a really big way.
But that's a great mentor. That's a great mentee lesson, is to, number one, come at the ask as what can I possibly do for you? Generally they'll say nothing, but then you'll get the meeting, and then really following up in some extraordinary ways. And you know what? I had a meeting with Steve Soboroff. He suggested some stuff. I probably wrote it down and didn't do it. And that's why I'm not still friends with him. And you are, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. It's like you and I expect our meeting.
Absolutely.
This is a friendship that hopefully can be some business together too. Whether it is or not is okay. But I guarantee we've already shared books with each other.
Right, absolutely.
We've shared different practices with each other. And then follow up on those things, we're going to respond back to them. And, hey, how was the book, right? And then that will just go to other, and that will develop
Absolutely.
a relationship that's beautiful. It's a friendship that could be potentially business or just a friendship that will absolutely open up new experiences. And this is, I think a lot what we're talking about, Paul, which is beautiful to me, is that one can have a podcast like this and talk about business. One can talk about life, and one can absolutely combine the two because they're not mutually exclusive. They're actually very, very much intertwined. And ultimately, for the final piece, is they're intertwined with one's really happiness. What is happiness, right, in life? And this is one component of happiness.
Sure.
It is not just making money. So I think this is an incredible. To me, this is an incredible important point in everything one does in business. If this is a business podcast, that can be, all these things are a part of being successful in your work or your professional life or in business in a big way. And
one of the things, because I want to get some real practical advice out there as well, which is, what can somebody do? And I have an idea of what to ask you about that, because you're talking at a much, frankly, what I consider to be a much higher level than where I generally practice real estate. And that is, zoning and what's happening and, how do you know these things? And instead of finding a piece of property and then going and trying to run and figure out which door on this, which city door do I knock on, which would just sounds like a nightmare and probably is a nightmare, that instead to kind of reverse engineer it so that, and I'll give you an example. I met a realtor who decided he was going to specialize in a particular area. His grandparents had lived there. He had not. But he saw it as really this really rich neighborhood that was, and when I say rich, I mean rich in culture and a place where he could really grow his business and his life. He moved there, so therefore, he's from LA. This area is in LA, so it's cross town essentially, and he just immersed himself in the community. And he started going to the city council meetings, and he started going to the planning meeting, little city planning committee, and it was interesting because I mentioned it before, but the transit had built a transit line through this area, which then brought people, and it became a more vibrant area. And then after a certain amount of time, they took a lot of this property by eminent domain, which means we're coming through with the train. So, you have to sell this swath of property, but as they often do, they overbought. And then the regulations forced them to say well, actually we're only using 70% of that. So then they put 30% of it back on the market with very special ordinances to grow particular types of buildings and developments and whatever. And, there's just no way, it's not a big enough town. There's no way people are going to know about that unless you're immersed. Right. So what does somebody do? What's my first step?
Are we talking specific in development?
Yeah, in development. Okay. Yeah. I haven't done entitlements. So I'm interested. Where do I do?
If you're looking at this nationally, if you're looking for a place to develop, you have to think about things like what's happening in California. You want to look for cities, states first, but then cities, specifically cities that are progressive in have a supply, demand and supply crisis, right? If we're talking housing, where is housing needed throughout? And you can pick a lot of major cities that are still growing or still needed. And I would suggest, just like you suggested, don't try to start out, or unless you're, on high rise, mid rise, right? But also pick the neighborhoods. One first, pick a city that is progressive in its ordinances that need more housing. number one, right? You will then, if they need more housing, generally in today's day and age, they're going to be more progressive than their ordinance. Two, you want to look at something, especially if you're just starting up, but even if you're sophisticated, that is by right, ministerial is other terms used. Things that you don't have to go through planning action. You don't have to go through subdivisions, community meetings, planning commissions. You go straight to the local building and safety or the one that oversees your building plans. Start there, right? Start there. Don't try to go to complex land use, entitlements. Yeah, you're not going to get the same multiples that you're going to get in those crazy, but those risks are extremely high. These risks are very, very low when it's by right development. Very low. Another thing is to starting out, especially stick to wood frame. Don't start doing subterranean podium, right? Don't do those crazy things. You can build a large project out of wood frame. In California, you can go up to 5 stories, even, with just wood frame, but throughout the country. So do your due diligence on that. Then once you do due diligence on that, then find the neighborhood. You were talking about the neighborhoods. Find neighborhoods that are adjacent to the very, already happening, growing, hip, gentrified, whatever term you want to use, then find that neighborhood, and then within that neighborhood, find what you think you have an expertise to build or partner with someone to build a single family home, one with an ADU, duplex. You can build multifamily. You want to build, there's multiple things, right, that one can do. And even if you don't have the skill to build that, if you find the parcel and you understand to do some work on the numbers, you can partner with people. If you find something of value, people will want to partner with you, or people will give you money to do that, especially if you have someone that is more expert than you are in a certain space and you can go find that person. So it's these steps. Now, note that what you brought up, the most difficult part you're going to face is you do all this work and you find these parcels, is how do you come up with the money, but you're going to have to risk money in development. This is a part of development that you didn't like and you did it on one parcel. You're going to have to do due diligence on your own money and risk. Risk. It's risk.
Yeah.
You have to do soils or both. It's both. But you will have to come up with some risk money. And so the way you mitigate coming up with that risk money is doing some basic due diligence. Don't buy next to a gas station, right? There's some basic due diligence you can find on your own. But at some point, you're going to have to do surveys or soils reports or phase 1 environmental report, right? But these things are pretty nominally priced depending on the size of the project. And by the way, if you are really entrepreneurial and you think you have a really good site, you can find someone that will put that money up to partner in the project, even if they only get a small piece of that, right? Maybe that's 20 grand, maybe that's 10 grand, right? So you can already overcome all these things.
There was an amazing, that deal that I mentioned to you. It's funny you say, don't go near a gas station, but a similar one is old school back in the day when they were using terrible chemicals for dry cleaning. A dry cleaning store is one thing, but a dry cleaning plant is something different. Right. And it was just this beautiful, so many ways it worked. Right. And one of the two things that I called brain damage is it actually had a dry cleaning plant on it. Right. And that's why everybody steered clear. And then it was auction. You didn't have time to do due diligence. Oof. But I went out and at the time, it was a lot of money still, but I just did a phase 1. Right. And if you clear the phase 1, then, you get security and they're 100%. Like, no, if you find something later, you're still okay because you've got the special company that did it. And we did a phase 1, it came back clear. And so, now we've really jumped a massive hurdle.
One can get into development and make money. One doesn't have to avoid it because of the high risk if you follow these guidelines that I just mentioned about the buy right side. Now, once you do a few buy right projects, then you can start to dive into the subdivisions and the other, more complex land use because there's exceptional value in those sites, right? And they can be treated buy right like with minimal planning clearances and still get your entitlement. But starting out, if you were to ask me if it's someone that was starting out in development, that's what I would advise is to do the buy right development. And it's all over the country.
Yeah, and I just want to put a highlight in there because even that it's just still a little bit of a term of art. And what by right means is this, and I'm going to say it, and then you can say, not right or correct me, but I want to say it so I can say it in a way that people like me who understand it less.
Understood. Yeah.
So you have a piece of property and it is zoned as one thing. So something is allowed there. A law is passed that says, hey, we want more of these other things. So we're going to let this type of zoning change happen within these certain parameters. And if you meet those certain parameters, then you don't need a hearing and all, and then then as long as there might be, it could be complicated. It may be complicated. It may not be complicated. You find somebody that really knows how to do it. There's these 7 boxes that need to be checked. And as long as these 7 boxes are checked, it goes into a different inbox. That inbox is like, no, we don't have to schedule a hearing. We don't have to.
I think the best way to say it is skips discretionary action.
Yes.
That is a simple way to say that there's no discretionary approvals. So it will still go through, let's say, Building and Safety, Bureau of Engineering, street, clearances, but those things are all well defined. You need to have a street that's this wide. You need to only have a house that's this high. You need to follow these structural engineering codes, which you hire a structural engineer to follow. But those are all certain things, right? Those are all things that are already predetermined guidelines that aren't going to move, and they don't take any further human action to make discretionary, subjective, or one would argue subjective approvals.
Correct.
They are a set box of rules that as long as you follow, you are going to get through the process.
Correct.
That is the key difference between by right and something that is not by right or discretionary.
Right.
It's a huge difference.
So when you have by right, which you've also have used a synonym for that, ministerial, you're talking about hey, they've set the guidelines, follow the guidelines, and then you're getting away from discretionary, meaning that somebody has the opportunity to say yes or no.
And by the way, I'll throw this in because most people skip this part and they don't understand it. When I say discretionary, I'm talking at government agencies, but you also have to play as part of that discretionary action politics. So I say politics. Local political appointed, voted in members, city council members, mayors,
planning division,
select people.
Yeah.
No. I'm separating
Blue ribbon.
I'm separating the two. There's the government agencies, and then there's the politicians. I'm using the word politicians. Your local elected officials is the best way to say it. If you have a discretionary action, absolutely, your local officials play a role in that discretionary approval. So not only do you bring why you want to go by right and not go discretionary, because it brings in both the political piece of it as well as the planning discretionary action.
Right.
So you have to overcome both of those. Whereas if you go by right, they play no role in that as long as you meet all the check boxes. Those two elements are taken out of that.
Give me a typical 2-story height restriction. Just throw a number
25
out there.
feet is usually the
25
first.
feet.
Yes.
So if you've got this by right thing that's 25 feet, and now I have my architect. This actually happened to me.
Yeah.
So I have my architect, and we have these. He's figured out this cool way where something's really only supposed to be 1 story. Now he's figured out a way to make it 2 stories by going up to the height limit. And let's just say that was 20 feet, and he's squeezing in the 2 stories. But then the upper mezzanine was I'm like, oh, it's just too low. Can we get another foot? And to get another foot moved us from ministerial by right into discretionary, which, by the way, you should not only
fire the architect, you should actually, we
came up with a great solution.
Well, it doesn't matter. That architect did you a disservice, but I'm glad I hope you figured it out. But
I'll tell you what we did was he drew something that was ministerial and was by right.
We did. Okay.
Absolutely. And I looked at it and I was like, that ceiling is just a little too low.
8'6" or something. Yeah.
It was, it's going to be weird up there.
Yeah.
How do we get an extra foot? And he's like, look, we cannot, because if you go an extra foot, it's just going to be a nightmare. It's going to move out of the ministerial. I'm just using a real life example. And then what we did is we, without requiring permission, we dug 1 foot down.
There you go.
Yeah. So you come in, you take 1 step down, and it just gives you it gave us the height, and we're still ministerial by right.
Similar things they do in the ADU ones. They only allow 18 feet in some of these extra units.
Right.
You dig down 2 feet. Now you have 20 feet and 9-foot ceilings or 9 something instead of the 8-foot ceilings.
Amazing.
Changes the whole volume and
amazing.
Light and air in the room.
One of the things that I know these guys are they're chomping at the bit actually for us to go into a business meeting, which I love.
Yes.
And I wonder if I can just ask you, give me the nickel version. It's fairly local, but SB 1123.
Right.
What's
when I say local, this is state. This is the state of California.
What's the big change, and why is this like massive?
Oh, this is a big change. These ordinances that I mentioned are all ordinances that you can build multifamily projects on R1 or single family home sites.
So now you're taking a single family home site and it's ministerial.
Ministerial.
Right.
No CEQA, ministerial by right that we just call no discretionary action.
And let me just tell you, I lived in Santa Monica. If you needed to go outside of whatever was ministerial, you're getting the biggest punch in the nose you've ever had in your life.
So you can use these ordinances, and as we talked about RENA, if you're talking state of California, RENA, the leverage you're using, these ordinances are magnificent. Also another ordinance, it's not an actual ordinance, Executive Director Order 1 in the city of Los Angeles for building 100% affordable housing is magical. It's been through multiple iterations right now, but it's still a very, very viable thing to build affordable housing, not with LIHTC or using government bonds or city bonds, but with private equity and debt. That's a beautiful, absolutely amazing thing to be used in the city of Los Angeles. Most major cities like San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose also have similar ordinances for this as well. So these are statewide ordinances. Essentially what's happened is anyone in that wants to get involved in the development business that has some experience or no experience is willing to seek and be curious like we talked about can actually build a project that has 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, 5 units with not that much equity. It's still some, but it's possible, I think, to achieve that if one is tenacious, and work with the builder to build this and be financially, if they hold it, it's beautiful, even sell it to be financially successful.
Before I met you, I would have suggested that if you wanted to do this, if I wanted to, like, for example, do a small lot subdivision, I didn't know how to do it, or take advantage of one of these things. What I would have done prior to meeting you is I would have run out and found an architect who's done many of these before. Do you think that's a good idea?
Absolutely. I think it's a really good idea. And even if you don't want to find an architect and maybe it's too expensive, you can find a land use expert. There's lots of land use companies out there, entitlement companies, that you can look at a property and pay them a really small fee. And even online, I mean,
technology has changed.
This is talk about, I just talked to a friend the other day that is developed using Pro ChatGPT. It's $200.
Yeah.
He's developed very extensive financial formulas, a very, very, large cash flowing, very complex formulas. You can use ChatGPT or any of these other AI tools, especially if you spend that extra money to get their higher versions, just for this to at least give you a first pass at whether you can use these ordinances, what you can build on that site. You can use that. Now you got to double check that. You can either go to an architectural firm, but architects want to get into contracts and whereas if you go to a land use consultant, they might do a quick thing for you for a very short amount of money. And by the way, there's a groups like one of them is like Brickwork. It's called.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know Brickwork.
They'll do it for a very inexpensive fee. Very inexpensive.
And
fee.
they're a tech company.
They're a tech. I know the owners very well.
Yeah, I know them too. Yeah,
they're one, but there's others that, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many tools out there that you don't have to go to an architect. I think you only go to an architect when you've done this due diligence that we're talking about, and you think you have something of value, and frankly, you now have to secure the site, right? So if you have a friend that's an architect, sure, they can do that. But architects are designers; they're not land use experts, right?
That's right. And what I did was I did use an architect for that once, but I found sort of like a mom and pop, and they had also done several of these. I was like,
so they knew the land use as well.
Can I buy you a cup of coffee?
Right.
I know you've done 3 or 4 of these things. I mean, I've got this property over here.
Right.
If I may not do it, but if I do, I would certainly put you at the top of the list.
And they're into business development, right?
Yeah.
They want to grow their business.
For sure. Okay, so they are giving me the let's go.
Okay.
So I want to do one thing, which is fire round. So I'm going to ask you some questions.
All right.
Knowing who you are and how deep a thinker you are, you could probably we could go back and forth on each one of them for a long time, but I'm just going to fire at you and I'm not going to say anything. And I'd love to hear your answers.
Great.
Okay. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
It's only one thing. It's love. It's the cornerstone of everything.
What's your greatest fear?
wow, I've really worked to minimize my fears, and it's not death, it's not suffering. Wow, I've worked to really minimize my fears. It's too much attachment. That might sound like not a strong answer, but it's attachment is probably my. And it's not a fear. It's just attachment brings so much other things, and trying to how to live on this planet and have attachments, but still be in a peaceful place. Yeah. So sorry, that's not necessarily the most evolved answer, but I don't fear death at this point and other things. So yeah, that is that.
I love it. What's your favorite childhood memory?
It's simple. It was beautiful. I had a brother that's 2.5 years older than me. We used to just come up with all these games in the house, like just silly games. We would furniture on one side and the sliding glass wall on the other, and just do street hockey. And we would play like that continuously for hours and hours together, and just organically, there was no computers and phones, come up with. It was a beautiful childhood memory of pure happiness and creativity and joy.
What's a trait that you have that you most dislike?
Control. Yeah, I've learned really, really recently in the last couple of years to really release that control. But it's control. I definitely come off as more of an easygoing type of personality, and I think I am. But underneath that is a desire to have control. And
what's a trait you most deplore in others?
Audacity. You know what I mean? Too much. Not audacity. Too much. Oh man, people that are very overly confident and just that's mine away. Yeah, that's what comes up first.
What talent would you most like to have?
It's funny. I really, really would love to play an instrument. Like I really would love to play an instrument and sing. So it's something we talked about it actually. It's absolutely something I need to pursue because I would love to do that.
What's your greatest extravagance?
It's food. I love good food. I just love it.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
I think this is cliche, but it's really being a parent, but more than just being a parent, because that's not a given, right? You just automatically a parent when children are born. But I think it's learning how to be a truly supportive, loving parent that doesn't try to, control their kids or overly control, like just be there for them. It's really love. And it's from that, it's my biggest achievement is recognizing that love is universal and it's magical. But it started, with my family, really my children, to understand what love really is. What's your most treasured possession? Again, I'm working so hard to give up all these things and not have them, to think about them anymore. My treasured possession. Physical possession. It's coins my dad collected, and he used to keep them in this little sock in his drawer. And he has some from he has some magical coins. And I used to take them out all the time and dump them on their bed, my mom and dad's bed, and just look at them for years. And then when he was passing, I asked him, and I have those coins. I think they're probably worth a little bit of money. I have no idea. But they mean so much to me. Just a really beautiful childhood memory and something my dad really loved to collect his coins. So yeah, that is probably my most really magical possession. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be? Openness, vulnerability, love, sharing. All of that. That's all I want to be remembered for. Really, is just is giving, right? It's giving. You go on a hike. There's great hikes in LA. You climb up very, very steep hill. You get to the very top and you look out on the vista, and there's your family, your triplets, your business partners, your friends, the community at large, and you yell one thing. What do you shout? Oh man, you know it. You already. It's too much. I hate to keep repeating it, but it's everything. It's just it's love, man. It's just love, right? It's friggin' it's that. It's all that. It's all that. It's just open yourself up to receive and to give. To give love, and if you do it, everything else flows. It really is that. So I know that I keep saying it, but it comes down to it in every way, shape, or form.
And when we shut the cameras off, well, I guess maybe I could say it now. I got that from that. There's a great psychologist and business coach, and she asks all these very, very successful people, and what do you think is the most common question, most common answer they give to that?
The one you just asked?
Yeah, I mean,
is it that what I said?
No, it's I mean, screw you, basically, but it starts with an F.
Hate.
And then I'll tell you what mine was.
What is yours? Yeah.
I mean, I've said it before on the podcast, and she asked us in a group of, it was Tiger 21, so these very successful guys, and she came around to me, and I had one, and I was too embarrassed to say it, because, you say the first thing that jumps into your mind, right? But then afterwards I said, hey, I want to tell you what mine was, because I was embarrassed to say it in front of everybody. And you know what it was? It was love me.
Love me.
Yeah.
So what is that? Yeah, I'm trying to understand that.
These guys are going to kill us because wrap up. Well, but I'll answer quickly. It was, if I want to be extra kind to myself, I would say that, I want to be someone worthy of
so
that
is it more
community.
Love myself instead of love me?
I mean, it's just what came out.
I think that interesting.
It's just what came out.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was also 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
if I had a second word, it would be gratitude, which I think
of course.
Before you get to love, I think you can start with gratitude
for sure.
to get to love.
For sure.
But
it's just what jumped into your, I was honest.
I think you were thinking love thyself is probably where you were probably going, right? Yeah.
Maybe.
I think so.
That would be generous.
Sounds right. You know what? Why not be generous?
Absolutely.
Be generous with yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
You.
Great.